Hi everyone, I am Mary Nicole Azala, and today we're going to discuss about the review of rubric assessment of student learning performance. So this is a topic about the rubric assessment, and this is just a review because we've already encountered this from the previous subject or the prerequisite subject ASL 1. So this is just a review. To begin, let us first discuss or define the word rubric. Okay, so when we hear the word rubric, of course, we think about criteria for judgment, things that sets the standards for judgment. But for definition, rubric is an evaluation tool. So it is a set of guidelines used to promote consistent application of learning expectations, learning objectives, and learning standards inside a classroom. So again, rubric is an evaluation tool. When we hear the word rubric, it equals or it automatically defined as an evaluation tool that sets a guideline as a standard of reaching the learning expectation, the learning objectives, and learning standards inside the classroom. So another definition is it measures the attainment against a consistent set of criteria. So rubric as an evaluation tool, rubric as a set of guideline, and rubric is as a measurement, as a tool used for measuring the attainment of a specific person or a student. As in our case, it is used to measure the attainment of a student against a consistent set of criteria. So for example, if teacher C wants to know student C's learning performance in English, he or she will use this rubric of assessment for that student's learning performance. So to identify or to know the student's learning performance for the whole grading of that specific subject or the English subject, the teacher will use this rubric of assessment, right? So this rubric contains a checklist that has indicators that will be rated according to that student's performance. So to know the overall performance of that student on English subject, we will give this checklist to 4 participants. So we will have 4 participants that are going to answer this checklist for us. So the first person will be you as a teacher advisor. Next is the student himself that is going to be evaluated. And next is the peer or the classmate that is present beside the student that is going to be evaluated perhaps. And lastly is the subject teacher or the English teacher that is always present during the learning performance. So the subject teacher has all the records, has the overall knowledge, or he or she, the subject teacher, knows better than the teacher advisor because she is more present in facilitating the subject or that student's learning performance. I'm going to show you an example of a checklist, right? So right here is an example of a checklist. So this checklist, right, let's consider that it is now given to these 4 participants, the student himself, his classmate, the teacher advisor, and the subject teacher. Now, as you can see, we have 6 indicators. The first indicator, as you can read, he or she was able to identify common idioms in a text. So what we say in a text, it means in a story, in a short story, or just a simple paragraph that also contains common idioms. So if you think as a teacher advisor, the student can perform this excellently, then you rate it 5. Okay, so going back, right, this checklist contains indicators, right? Indicators and criteria for rating. So these criteria for rating are divided into 5. So we have 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. 5 means excellent, 4 means very good, 3 means good, and 2 means fair, and 1 means poor, which means the student can either perform, you can rate the students' learning performance either excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor, which means it needs more attention and it needs more encouragement, and you need to focus more on this student's area where he or she lacks. Okay, so it gives the teacher also the knowledge where to focus or where to provide feedback to the students. Now let's move on. So these are the indicators. As you can see, we have 6 indicators. If you think that these indicators is performed well, or this specific indicator is performed well by the student, then you can rate it 5. If you think he can manage, but he's still doing it good or very good, you can rate it 4 or 3. If he needs more help, or if he can't really do it at all, you can rate it 2 or 1. So the first indicator means he or she was able to identify common idioms in a text. Second indicator is he or she was able to identify common idioms in a poem. If the student can identify the common idioms inside that piece, then if you think he did that excellently, then you can rate it 5. Or if not, it's either 4, 3, 2, or 1. The same with the third indicator. If he or she was able to construct sentences using an idiomatic expression, then you can rate it 5. If you think otherwise, then you can rate it 4, 3, 2, or 1. Number 6, he or she was able to construct paragraphs using multiple idiomatic expressions. Now next is he or she was able to demonstrate usage of idiomatic expressions in a speech or conversations. So we're just speaking as a teacher advisor, right? Personally. Or if I am the classmate, or if I am that student himself, let's name the student Chris. Okay, so if Chris is able to do or to perform this indicator well, or he is able to demonstrate a usage of idiomatic expression between a simple speech or a presentation or between a conversation, then if he can do that, then you know what to rate him. Next is he or she was able to demonstrate usage of multiple idiomatic expressions in a speech or conversations. So when we say multiple, again, it means 2 or more, right? If he or she can use 2 or more multiple idiomatic expressions in a speech or during a conversation at the same time. So if you think that he can demonstrate the usage of multiple idiomatic expressions in a speech or conversation at the same time, then you know what to rate Chris. Okay? Now, let's say that we've already distributed this checklist to the 4 participants we have chosen. So the first participant being you as a teacher advisor, or in this case, me. Next is the student. Next is his peer or his classmate. Next is the subject teacher himself or herself. Now that we've given them the checklist, then you're going to collect it. And then, of course, we're going to assess the checklist or their ratings of student Chris. So for example, this is the checklist of Chris. So for the first indicator, he rated himself 5. For the second indicator, he rated himself 5 also until the 5th indicator. So he thinks that he is able to identify, construct, and demonstrate idiomatic expressions excellently. But he indicated himself very good. He rated himself very good at the last indicator because he thinks that he can do it, but not that excellently. So he rated himself 4. So for Chris checklist, we have 5 ratings of 5 and 1 rating of 4. For his peer, also, he thinks that Chris is able to identify common idioms in a text, in a poem, and he's able to construct sentences using an idiomatic expression excellently. Although he was able to construct paragraphs using multiple idiomatic expressions for his classmate, he is not able to do it excellently, though he is kind of good at it. And also, he thinks Chris is able to demonstrate usage of idiomatic expressions in his speech or conversation excellently. So he rated Chris 5. And last, for the last indicator, he thinks the same way as Chris, that Chris is also not able to demonstrate usage of multiple idiomatic expressions in a speech or conversations at the same time. So that is their rating. So these two's ratings, we can consider it not really credible or not really valid. Although it's valid, but it's not the same. It does not have the same credibility as the subject teacher's checklist or the teacher advisor checklist, because they check or they rate based on their recordings. So we can assume though that for Chris and his classmate, it has an element of bias, and their standards of rating or their standards of judging or evaluating are not the same as for the standards of a subject teacher and a teacher advisor. Okay, so we're going to give them 10% of 10% in our criteria for the whole rubric assessment. So 10 for Chris and 10 for his classmate. Next is the subject teacher. Now this subject teacher is very credible, right? So because he or she is present during the whole learning performance since day 1 until the end. So he or she is there or ever present, facilitating the student's learning performance. So we will give the subject teacher a 45% in our criteria for the overall rubric assessment. Next, for the teacher advisor.
So as you can see on the checklist, the teacher advisor also thinks that Chris was able to identify common idioms in a text and in a poem, and he was also able to construct sentences using common idiomatic expressions excellently. But the teacher advisor also has the same rating as the subject teacher on the 6th indicator, which has a 3 rating, which means Chris can only, he or she also thinks that Chris can only do this quite good.
We give the teacher advisor 35%. So the teacher advisor has a 35%, 45% for the subject teacher, 10% for Chris, and his peer also has 10%. So let's move on. What do we do next after we get all the checklists, we get all these results? Now we move on summarizing them. Let's specify all their answers per indicator. So for 6 indicators, we're going to identify what are the ratings of Chris, his peer, the subject teacher, and teacher advisor of Chris' performance in English. So for the first indicator, we have he or she was able to identify common idioms in a text. So according to the checklist earlier, all of them rated Chris 5. So as you can see on the table that I made, since we need to specify their own ratings of Chris' performance or these indicators, let's put them all together. So as you can see, the first column we put self, peer, subject, teacher, teacher advisor all in a single column. Next is their rating. So what were their rating earlier? We have 5, 5, 5, and 5. All of them rated the first indicator, which has he or she was able to identify common idioms in a text, 5. So all of them agreed that Chris can do this indicator excellently. Now what the next column, what it will contain is the decimal equivalent of their percentage. So for example, what is the decimal equivalent of 10%? So the decimal equivalent of 10% is 0.1. How about 10% again? Of course, it's 0.1. Next, for subject teacher, so the decimal equivalent of 45% is 0. 0.45. Next is, what is this decimal equivalent of 35%? It means it has the decimal equivalent of 0.35%. Now, what do we do with this table? To get the total later, because we need the total ratings per indicator. So what we're going to do is multiply it to get the total rating of the indicators. We're going to multiply the rating and the decimal equivalent of the percentages of the participants percentage for the total criteria, and then sum it up all together, or get the sum of the products of all the indicators. So what is 5 times 0.1? It's equals to 0.5, and then you're going to repeat it until the last participant. So for example, we've already done that. So to get the total rating of that, since we already have all the product, we are going to add everything. So what is the total of 0.5 plus 0.5 plus 2.25 plus 1.75? So the total of this, so we get a total of 5. Sorry. So how do we get the qualitative interpretation of, so this qualitative interpretation will be based on the ratings that we have earlier, right? So from earlier, we have 5 ratings, right? We have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and each of them has an equivalent, right, or an interpretation. So when we say 5, it means excellent. When we say 4, it means very good. And when we say 3, it means good. And when we say 2, it means fair. And if we rate it 1, it means it's poor. Now, so what does 5 represent in our table earlier, or in our checklist earlier, right? 5 represents excellent. So the qualitative interpretation of, for the first indicator, which is 5, then it is excellent. So in this case, for the third indicator, since we have a rating that is different from all the ratings of the three person, we have subject teacher who rated the third indicator able to construct sentences using an idiomatic expression. He rated this performance as 4. So we have a different result than the previous tables, right? We have a total rating of 4.55. So what does 4 in our checklist? What is equivalent to 4.55 in our checklist? So since it has a whole number of 4, the quantitative interpretation of 4.55 is very good. So we have a total rating of 3.65. So we're going to change that, 3.65. So what does 3 represent in our checklist earlier? 3 represents good. So the fourth indicator, the total rating of it from all the participants is that Chris is able to construct paragraphs using multiple idiomatic expressions good, or quite good. So that is the total rating, the interpretation of the total rating. Next is number 5. So for number 5, the rating from Chris is 5. His peer also rated this one 5. His subject teacher, I think, rated this 4, as well as his teacher advisor. So we have 2, 5, and 2, 4. So we have a total rating of 4.2. So what does 4.2 stands for in our checklist? It is very good. So the qualitative interpretation of the total rating of 4.2 for the indicator that says Chris is able to demonstrate usage of idiomatic expressions in a speech or conversation, it has a total rating of 4.2, which means he is very good at this. Okay. Lastly, so we have 2 4s and 2 3s. So we're total, which has 3.2, and what does 3.2 stands for in our checklist? It equals to good. So that is the total rating. Now that we got all of their ratings, let's move on to totally summarizing the total ratings per indicator and then get the grand mean and also get the final interpretation, the final qualitative interpretation that will finally assess that student's learning performance. Okay, with all the after all the criteria of percentages for participants is performed, after everything is extracted, we're going to total it, get the mean. So we're going to total the total ratings and then divide it to the number of indicators. So I'm going to show you how it is done. Okay, since we've got all of the total rating of the indicators from the 4 participants, now we're going to make another table which has 3 columns. The first column still containing the indicator, but the second column contains the mean, that what we call the total ratings of the indicators. For indicator number 1, we have a total rating of 5, right? And the qualitative interpretation on the next column, which is interpreted as excellent. 5 is equal to excellent. So as you can see in our table, it is already plotted here. And we're going to write the indicators in the first column, the table. Next is the mean of all the total ratings, or the total ratings of these indicators as what we have solved earlier, and then the qualitative interpretation of these indicators total ratings from based on the equivalent of the ratings from our checklist. So 5 is interpreted as excellent, 4 is for very good, 3 is for good, 2 is for fair, and 1 is for poor. So those are the equivalent of those ratings, what we call as qualitative interpretations. So after plotting putting all the indicators, after putting all the total ratings, after putting all the qualitative interpretations, now we're going to get the grand mean. So the grand mean indicates or is the final boss, no? So this is what will really provide you the assessment of the student's learning performance. So whatever comes out and whatever is the value of the grand mean, you still need to interpret it, give it the qualitative interpretation according to our checklist earlier. So as you can see in the table, the sum of the total rating, so 5 plus 5, 4 plus 4.55, plus 3.65, plus 4.2, plus 3.2 is equal to 25.6. So 25.6 is not the total not the total number or the total data that will provide us the exact assessment, right? So you still have to divide it to the number of indicators, of course, because how to get the mean is the same way you're going to get the average. So you're going to add all of the factors that are there, you're going to add all the numbers and then divide it according to the amount of the numbers or the number of the numbers, right? So if there is 7 random numbers, you're going to add all of the random numbers and then divide them all by 7. And in this case, you're going to add all of the total ratings and then divide it to the number of total ratings that we have, which is 6. So 25.6 as the sum of all the total ratings, then dividing it by 6, we have a total grand mean of 4.2666667, which can also be 4.267 or 4.27. I mean 4.27. So 4 in our checklist earlier is equal to very good, right? So the grand mean, which is equivalent to 4.267 or 4.27, is has the qualitative interpretation of very good. So that is the total assessment of the student learning performance. In conclusion, since student Chris has the grand mean of 4.267 or 4.27, we can conclude from the participants who answered the checklist, which is his peer, his deputy teacher, his teacher advisor, and himself, Chris' performance in English subject is very good. That is how you're going to get the rubric assessment of a student's learning performance. So that is all, and I hope you learned something so that you can answer my formative test. And good luck on your formative test. That is all. Thank you.